'Twas another tense day at the White House press briefing room. The buzz of anticipation hung in the air. As reporters shuffled in, cameras flashed, and seats were taken, President Donald Trump had just finished his usual morning routine and was ready to face the press once again today. However, would not be just any other briefing. The stakes were higher, the questions sharper, and the atmosphere more charged than ever before. The target of the day, as had often been the case with CNN, among the crowd of reporters was Caitlyn Collins, a rising star at CNN, known for her direct and unflinching style. Collins was determined to ask the tough questions. None else dared to. She had already built a reputation for holding Trump's feet to the fire, especially when it came to sensitive subjects like foreign policy and his relations with controversial figures. Today was no different. She had prepared herself for another round of tough questioning, knowing full well that the president would not shy away from a battle. As Trump made his way to the podium, the room went silent. The only sound was the rapid clicking of cameras. Trump stood tall, his face a mix of determination and defiance. He was accustomed to these moments where he would face an army of reporters eager to challenge him, but he wasn't intimidated. If anything, he was energized by the confrontation. "Good afternoon, everyone," Trump began, his voice booming in the cavernous room. "Let's get started." Caitlyn Collins was the first to raise her hand. She had a question, one that had been on her mind for days. This time he would not let them off easy. "Mr. President," Collins began, "there have been growing concerns about your relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin in light of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Do you still trust President Putin's word when he says he wants peace? Or do you think he's using diplomacy as a cover for his true intentions?" There it was, the question. Trump had been expecting the question. He knew would come up in every press briefing, especially after his earlier statements about Putin. Trump's expression hardened slightly, but his confidence never wavered. "Well, Caitlyn," Trump replied, his tone calm but firm, "I do believe Putin wants peace. We've had discussions, and from what I've gathered, he's looking for a way to de-escalate the situation. Unlike the current administration, I believe there's an opportunity for dialogue. That's what I'm focused on, finding or bring an end to the conflict." The room was silent for a brief moment as reporters. Trump's response, it was a typical answer, one that showcased his desire to maintain a strong relationship with Russia. But Caitlyn was not one to let things slide. She wasn't done. Yet she leaned forward here, eyes fixed on Trump, prepared to press further. "Mr. President, but the war has already led to thousands of lives, lost cities destroyed, and millions of people displaced. How can you justify saying that Putin wants peace when the evidence shows otherwise? Are you not concerned about the humanitarian crisis unfolding?" Trump's eyes narrowed, and a small smirk appeared on his lips. He had anticipated this line of questioning, but he was ready for it. He leaned back into the podium and looked around the room. His voice grew slightly sharper. "Caitlyn, you have to understand," Trump said, his hands clasped in front of him. "This war should have never happened, but it did. And now the question is not what Putin wants, but what we can do to end it. The current administration, Biden, has failed to stop it. They've let the cities fall, the people suffer, but I don't see anyone asking why this conflict was allowed to escalate. In the first place, we could have had peace long ago, but Biden didn't take action when he should have." The room shifted slightly. Trump's words cut through the tension, but they were controversial, and Kate, eager to stay on her course, wasn't about let them off the hook. "But Mr. President," she pressed, "you're saying that the current administration is responsible for this escalation, but are you not concerned about your own rhetoric by coining up to Putin, by questioning NATO's role? Aren't you contributing to the confusion and lack of accountability on the global stage?" Trump's response was swift. "Look, Caitlyn," has napped his tone now, more defensive. "What I'm doing is something you'll never understand. I'm speaking the truth. NATO has been ineffective for years, and don't you dare say I'm coining up to Putin. What I'm doing is trying to de-escalate the situation, trying to find common ground, something none else in yours are sealing to do. All want war, not peace." The room fell into an awkward silence. Caitlyn Collins was taken aback by the forcefulness of Trump's words. She had expected a debate, but not this kind of confrontation. She could feel the weight of the room's eyes on her. Every move she made was under scrutiny, but she was not backing down. "I'm just trying to understand, Miss President." Caitlyn persisted, her voice steady, though her frustration was evident. "You've said on multiple occasions that Putin is a strong leader, that he's tough. Are you now suggesting that he's acting in good faith? What's your plan to ensure that peace will be achieved?" Trump's eyes flickered with a sharp intensity. He didn't take Cleto being questioned repeatedly, especially by someone from CNN. The dynamic between him and Collins had always been tense, and today was no different. Trump's voice was colder, now dripping with disdain. "Caitlyn," he began, his voice icy, "you're not listening. You're too focused on making headlines to actually understand the situation. But let me tell you something. Putin is a leader, and you can disagree with me all you want, but what's happening in Ukraine is not just about one man, it's about the entire geopolitical landscape, something you and your network frankly fail to grasp. Trump paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. He wasn't done yet. And you want to talk about accountability? Where's the accountability for the disaster that's unfolded under Biden's watch? Where's the outrage over the cities that have been reduced to rubble? The lives the soldiers? Noon is asking those questions. Are they? Caitlyn Collins opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Trump turned his attention to another reporter. Next question. Please, he said dismissively, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife as the room moved on. To another question. Caitlyn Collins stood there speechless for a moment, their face flushed with frustrations. He had come into this briefing ready to challenge the president, but Trump had completely turned the tables on her. It was a blow to her confidence, and everyone in the room could feel it. For Trump, this was just another victory, a moment in a long-running battle with the media. He had taken control of the situation, disarmed Collins, and made a statement that would linger long after the briefing was over. Caitlyn Collins had underestimated Trump's ability to dominate the room, and its hold. The press conference had only just begun, but already it was clear Donald Trump was in charge, and CNN had lost again after his tense exchange with Caitlyn Collins. Donald Trump did not stop at simply dismissing her. He continued his attack on CNN in subsequent press conferences, emphasizing that the network was losing credibility with the public, and questioning why reporters, particularly Collins, were even allowed to ask questions. Trump relentlessly criticized CNN for spreading false information, especially on political and diplomatic matters, particularly those concerning Russia. Here's why Noon watches CNN anymore. Trump remarked during one briefing, they've lost all credibility. Especially Caitlyn Collins. I don't even understand why she's still allowed to stand here asking questions. His criticism of Collins wasn't just about her specific questions. It was a blanket attack on the entire network, which he accused of spreading misinformation and failing to report fairly. Trump continued to bash CNN for its biased coverage, particularly when it came to Russia in the internation. All stage, you guys don't understand the situation. You're all too focused on pushing your own agenda. Trump added if CNN really cared about the truth, they'd start reporting things correctly instead of continuing this nonsense. As the press conferences went and Trump didn't let up, he took every opportunity to highlight what he believed were CNN's failures in covering the issues that mattered most. They made it clear that he didn't care whether CNN liked him or not. What mattered was the fact that they had failed to present the reality of the situation, particularly in his dealings with Russia. In another interview, Trump didn't shy away from going after Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republican Party. For Trump, McConnell represented an obstacle, someone who was not strong enough to keep the party unified in the face of adversity. Trump claimed that if it weren't for him, the Republican Party would have ceased to exist in its current form. Mitch McConnell's not the right person to lead the party anymore. Trump declared in a strong interview, "I let the Republican Party go down the drain, and if I hadn't come along, the party would have been dead." This was not the first time Trump had publicly criticized McConnell, but their rhetoric was becoming sharper. Trump's critique wasn't just about McConnell's political decisions. He also went after McConnell's health, insinuating that McConnell was mentally unfit to continue leading the party. He's got polio, Trump said bluntly, referring to McConnell's history of health struggles. I don't know why someone like that should be in charge of the party. He just doesn't have what it takes to lead. Trump's statements were jarring, and they caused a stir among both Republicans and Democrats. McConnell's health had been an ongoing issue, but Trump's public comments about McConnell's physical condition were unprecedented. Trump, I didn't hold back. He believed that McConnell's weaknesses, both political and physical, had cost the Republican Party dearly. McConnell has the ability to raise money, but that's about it. Trump continued, anyone can raise money, but leadership, that's a different story. I was the one who really saved the Republican Party. Without might would have fallen apart. Trump's criticism of McConnell went further. He claimed that McConnell had failed to use his power effectively, letting key votes slip away and failing to push through critical legislation. Trump's words were painting McConnell a salmon who had failed to live up to the expectations of the party, and in doing so made the entire party weaker. Despite McConnell's previous loyalty to Trump, their relationship had soared. Trump had no hesitation in calling out McConnell for what he saw as a lack of strength. It was clear Trump was not interested in keeping old alliances if they no longer served his purpose. She had bigger goals, and anyone who didn't align with those goals was expendable. Throughout the press briefings, the tension between Trump and the establishment was palpable. This wasn't just about reporters. This was about Trump's war against the Republican establishment, the Washington elite, and the media, he was determined to reshape the party and the nation in his image, and anyone who stood in his way, whether it was CNN or Mitch McConnell, would face his wrath. Trump's unrelenting attacks on CNN and Mitch McConnell served a clear purpose. They were about solidifying his control by publicly diminishing the credibility of CNN. He ensured that his narrative was the only one worth listening to by attacking McConnell. He demonstrated that the most powerful figures within his own party were not safe from his criticism. His approach was simple. If they didn't perform to his standards, they were irrelevant. As the press conferences continued, the battle lines were drawn more clearly than ever before. Trump was not just the president, there was a force of nature, unwilling to back down from any fight, whether it was with the press, his political allies, or his enemies. The confrontation with Collins was just the beginning, and the rest of the political landscape would soon feel the full brunt of his unwavering confidence. It had been a few days since the fiery press conference where Donald Trump had shut down Caitlyn Collins. The aftermath of the ire exchange is stilling, not just in the White House press room, but across the media landscape for Caitlyn Collins, our reporter who had prided herself on her ability to challenge the president. This was a moment of reckoning. Trump had dismissed her with a condescending remark, cutting her off before she could finish her line of questioning. But it wasn't just the president's refusal to engage that stung. It was the way Trump had publicly demolished CNN's credibility and questioned her professionalism in front of the entire room for Collins. This wasn't just a day at work. It felt like a personal defeat. She had come into the briefing confident, prepared to press the president on the issues she felt mattered most. But when Trump turned the tables on her and publicly humiliated her, it was a blow to her journalistic integrity. She was no longer just another reporter asking questions. She had become a symbol of the media establishment that Trump had spent years attacking. That evening, Collins made her way to CNN's studio, preparing for her segment. The interview was set up as a response to the press conference she would address to Trump had dismissed her and CNN's broader role in the administration's ongoing battles with the press. She entered the studio knowing the stakes were high. This wasn't just about defending herself, it was about defending the journalistic integrity of CNN, a network Trump had relentlessly targeted throughout his presidency. As the cameras rolled, Collins spoke with the same composure she always did, but her words were laced with frustration. Today, I was publicly dismissed by the president in a way that I think crossed all Neshabigan. What happened in that briefing wasn't about policy, it was about silencing the press. It's not the first time this has happened, but it's clear that the president is trying to delegitimize those of us who challenge him. She counted the moment when Trump cut her off, saying that he wasn't interested in hearing her questions. He made it personal. Collins continued, it wasn't just about the issue, it was about undermining the media and those who dare to ask the tough questions. I'm not the first reporter he's attacked, and I certainly won't be the last. Collins' tone was firm, but there was an undercurrent of frustration as she reflected on the entire exchange to her. This was more than just a typical press briefing goner. It was another chapter in the larger battle between the White House and the press for CNN. This was not just about one reporter being silenced. It was about the network's role in standing up to an administration that had been openly hostile toward the media since day one. But as Collins finished recounting her experience, the tone of the interview began to shift. Their attempt to portray herself as a victim of Trump's animosity was met with skepticism from some quarters. Critics, including Trump's staunch supporters on social media, wasted time in undermining her narrative. They argued that Collins was just another member of the mainstream media that had become too comfortable challenging the president. They believed she was more interested in making a spectacle out of her exchange with Trump than in reporting the news fairly and accurately. On social media, the debate intensified. Trump's supporters rallied behind him, applauding his ability to shut down the media with confidence. Trump did what any leader should do. He took control of the situation. One comment read, Caitlyn Collins wasn't asking questions, she was trying to score political points. Trump is right to call them out. The day went, and it became clear that Trump's supporters had seized control of the narrative. Collins had been turned into a symbol of what they saw as the elitist media's arrogance. The more Collins tried to defend herself, the more it seemed like she was digging herself into a hole. Her attempt to portray herself as the victim only further entrenched the perception that she was a part of a media establishment that had failed to understand or connect with the American people. Meanwhile, the critics of CNN were quick to pounce in the aftermath of the press briefing. Several commentators expressed disappointment in the network's handling of the situation. It's embarrassing that CNN allowed their reporter to get steamrolled. Like that one commentator said, Trump is playing the game on his terms and CNN is failing to respond effectively. CNN had long been a target for Trump and his supporters of coup. Ours reveled in the fact that Collins had been publicly humiliated, but what struck many of observers was the larger implication of the exchange Trump had successfully disarmed the media, and particularly CNN, in a way that few had anticipated. While Collins's appearance on CNN may have been meant to reframe the press conference as a moment of injustice, it ultimately played into Trump's hands. His detractors couldn't help but notice that Ani here was a reporter from a network that had spent years covering Trump's every move, trying to hold him accountable, but now a position where they were struggling to answer for themselves. The public's perception was telling, while Trump's response to Collins' line of questioning might have been harsh, it was undeniably effective. The president had turned the tables on Collins in a way that left her with little ground to stand on. The narrative had shifted from a moment of journalistic questioning to one of media humiliation on social media. The conversation was dominated by Trump's supporters, who praised his ability to stay in control. Trump knows how to handle the media. Another comment read, he's not going to let them twist his words. They don't get control of the narrative anymore. By contrast, CNN's credibility was further called into question. The network, already criticized for its perceived bias, was now facing criticism for failing to control the narrative. Trump had once again shown that he could dominate the press in a way that no one else had before, making it clear that the media's traditional methods of challenging power were no longer as effective as they once were. Even some within CNN itself were now beginning to question their approach. How had they let tone of their own reporters become so publicly discredited? How could they allow someone like Trump to so thoroughly dismantle their credibility? With a meaningful response, these questions hung in the air as the network moved forward, realizing that its once ironclad hold political reporting had been shaken. In the end, the public's image of Donald Trump remained largely intact, if not stronger. His performance in the briefing had solidified his position as a dominant figure, one who could challenge the media and come out victorious. Trump had once again outmaneuvered CNN, leaving the network on the defensive. The final image that remained after the press briefing was one of Trump standing tall and shaken in complete control of the situation. His words had struck a powerful blow, and while Caitlyn, Collins, and CNN had tried to respond, they were left struggling to gain the narrative. Trump's ability to dismantle the media's narrative wasn't just about shutting down individual reporters. It was about dismantling the entire media ecosystem that had been critical of him for so long. With each press conference, each interaction, he continued to assert this dominance, showing that in the world of political power, the media was no longer the unchallenged force. It was Caitlyn. Collins may have walked away from the briefing frustrated, but it was clear that in the war between Trump and CNN, Trump had emerged victorious once again. The media had been defeated in their attempt to challenge his authority. And as for Trump, had proven once again that when it came to the press, he was always one step ahead.